The night the Brentwood estate turned into a scene of horror was one no one could have imagined. A luxurious home, worth millions, nestled in the quiet, sun-drenched hills of Los Angeles, transformed into a place of unimaginable tragedy. Rob Reiner, the iconic filmmaker, known for classics like When Harry Met Sally and A Few Good Men, and his beloved wife Michelle, were found dead inside their sprawling $13.5 million mansion. But the shock didn't end there. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. The person who allegedly committed the unthinkable was none other than their own son, Nick Reiner. And now, the world is learning something even stranger. Despite being accused of murdering his parents, Nick still appears in their will, receiving exactly $1. How could this be possible? Why would Rob Reiner, a man known for his meticulous nature and careful planning, leave a trace of wealth to the very son who allegedly killed him? This isn't just a curiosity. It's a shocking legal strategy, one designed to prevent chaos, protect the family, and yet provoke outrage in those who survive him. And the first person to uncover this bizarre twist? Jake Reiner, the eldest son, who has been left reeling, furious that his brother is even mentioned symbolically. He says, he shouldn't be mentioned, not even symbolically. But what Rob intended, and what the law actually allows, is far more calculated than anyone outside the family could ever understand. The scene at the Brentwood estate was chilling. On Sunday, December 14th, police were called to the quiet street after reports of a violent incident. Inside, Rob and Michelle were found with multiple sharp force injuries, the result of a brutal attack that ended their lives. The bodies had been discovered by their daughter, Romy Reiner, 27, who immediately alerted authorities about what she believed to be a dangerous family member. Her account would later become a cornerstone in the police investigation, as investigators began to piece together the timeline of events and the shocking reality that Nick, 32, had been living on the property in the guest house, literally steps away from where the tragedy occurred. From the first moment the news broke, the story captured the attention of the nation. Headlines screamed, social media erupted, and the questions began piling up. How could this happen in one of the most affluent neighborhoods in Los Angeles? What could have led a son to allegedly commit such a heinous act? And most importantly, what did Rob Reiner intend with his will, and how did it intersect with this family tragedy? Jake Reiner's discovery of the hidden clause in the will added an entirely new dimension to the story. According to legal experts, leaving Nick exactly $1 was a deliberate move, a legal loophole designed to prevent him from contesting the will. It's a tactic often used in high-stakes estates to avoid family disputes, but it carries with it a profound emotional weight, especially in this context. Jake's reaction was immediate and intense: outrage, disbelief, anger. To him, seeing his brother named in any capacity was intolerable. To the law, however, it was a masterstroke of precaution. Imagine being in Jake's shoes. You're dealing with the grief of losing both parents in an act of unimaginable violence. You're processing the shock that the person accused of killing them is your own brother. And then you learn that this same brother is technically a beneficiary of your parents' estate. It's the kind of situation that feels like a nightmare made real. A complex intersection of family betrayal, legal maneuvering, and the emotional devastation of losing the people who shaped your entire life. How do you reconcile the law with your heart? How do you reconcile justice with your own rage and grief? But let's take a step back and look at the broader context. Rob Reiner was not just a public figure. He was a man who meticulously planned every aspect of his professional and personal life. His films, his public persona, and even his personal affairs show a pattern of careful consideration. Leaving $1 to Nick was not a mistake. It was an intentional act of foresight, a safeguard built into a system that is otherwise cold and unforgiving. According to his lawyer, this small sum serves a crucial purpose. By naming Nick, Rob legally prevents him from contesting the will, which could otherwise spark a prolonged legal battle over the estate. $1, almost laughably small in the context of a $13.5 million estate, becomes a strategic move that protects what remains of the family's wealth and structure. But here's the irony that makes the situation so gripping. The law and emotion collide in the most dramatic fashion. Legally, Rob Reiner's decision is brilliant. Emotionally, it's infuriating to Jake, Romy, and anyone who empathizes with the surviving family members. Symbolically, it's a bitter pill to swallow. A constant reminder of the son accused of murder and the meticulous planning of a father who is no longer there to explain himself. It raises questions about fairness, morality, and what it truly means to protect a family in the aftermath of violence. The media frenzy surrounding this discovery has only amplified the tension. Reports began circulating about the nature of the murders, Nick's arrest on 2 counts of first-degree murder, and the role of Romy in discovering her parents' bodies. Each detail adds layers of intrigue. The exact timing of the attack, the forensic analysis of the sharp force injuries, and the psychological profile that investigators are building around Nick. Meanwhile, the will becomes a symbol, a focal point for public speculation. How could a single dollar wield such power? Why does its existence provoke both legal clarity and emotional chaos? And most provocatively, could this small sum hold the key to unraveling even more hidden secrets within the Reiner family? As Jake delves deeper into the estate and the will, the tension mounts. Every page he uncovers, every clause he reads, carries with it the weight of what has been lost and the gravity of what might come. The discovery of this clause isn't just about money. It's about legacy, justice, and the symbolic presence of Nick in a family that is grappling with shock and betrayal. How much of what we see in legal documents is strategy, and how much is a message from beyond the grave? Rob's intentions, while clear to the legal mind, are open to interpretation for those who are grieving, for those trying to make sense of an act that defies understanding. The narrative takes on multiple layers here: the tragedy of the murders, the legal intricacies of the will, and the deeply personal turmoil of a family in crisis. Jake is not merely reacting to the clause. He is confronting the embodiment of the family's fractured reality. Each day brings new revelations, whether from forensic reports, police statements, or the ongoing legal assessments of the will. The story unfolds like a tightly scripted drama, complete with twists, emotional spikes, and moments that leave the audience questioning what they thought they knew about family, loyalty, and justice. And just when it seems the tension couldn't rise any higher, there's a twist. The $1 clause, which at first glance seems almost trivial, has far-reaching implications. By legally naming Nick, Rob ensured that the estate could move forward without being tied up in litigation. He controlled the narrative even after death, exercising power over the family's future from beyond the grave. But for Jake, this strategic brilliance is overshadowed by the raw, unfiltered reality of betrayal and grief. He sees it as a slight, a cruel reminder that Nick's presence cannot be fully erased. The law may favor strategy, but human emotion is rarely so neat or forgiving. For the audience, this story raises irresistible questions. What motivated Nick? How did family dynamics shape the events leading up to the tragedy? How did Rob's meticulous planning intersect with human unpredictability? And most importantly, what other secrets could still be hiding in the will, the estate, or the family's past? Each revelation teases the next, creating a narrative that is both complex and impossible to turn away from. You can feel the tension building, the stakes rising, and the emotional resonance deepening with every passing moment. As we move forward, the layers of this story will unravel in dramatic fashion. We will explore the Reiner family dynamics, the full extent of the legal strategy behind the will, and the shocking truths that have only just begun to emerge. The media coverage, social reactions, and investigative insights will add depth and intensity to the unfolding drama. And through it all, Jake Reiner's emotional journey will serve as a lens, guiding us through a narrative that is equal parts legal intrigue, family betrayal, and personal heartbreak. But just when you think you have a handle on the story, the question lingers. If Rob Reiner's intentions were so carefully calculated, what else might he have hidden in the estate or the will? Could there be other clauses, other protections, or even more shocking revelations that have yet to surface? And how will the family react as these truths come to light? The answers are coming, but they will challenge everything we think we know about justice, loyalty, and the true meaning of family. And that is where our journey begins. What really happened on that quiet Sunday in Brentwood? The kind of day that starts off like any other, yet ends in horror no one could have predicted. Picture it, the sun streaming over manicured lawns, luxury cars parked neatly in the driveways, birds chirping in the trees. And inside the Reiner estate, a story of tragedy was about to unfold that would shock the world. Rob and Michelle Reiner were found lifeless in their home, victims of multiple sharp force injuries, a brutal act that no one outside the family could fully comprehend. But let's rewind for a moment. Sunday, December 14th, began like any other day. Rob, 78, was reportedly enjoying a quiet morning, going through notes, preparing for what he thought would be another ordinary day in his carefully ordered life. Michelle, 70, was tending to her morning routines, everything meticulously planned as it always was. But somewhere along the line, the day turned into a nightmare. The details of how the tragedy unfolded are pieced together from police reports, witness statements, and investigative leaks. Romy Reiner, 27, discovered the bodies. She reportedly found her parents and immediately called 911, raising the alarm that there was a dangerous family member who should be a suspect. That person, of course, was her brother, Nick Reiner, 32, who had been living in the guest house on the property. The proximity is chilling, steps away from where the crime occurred, a reminder of how close safety and danger can exist side by side in the same home. Police reports describe the scene in stark, unsettling terms. Multiple sharp force injuries, the kind of wounds that speak of rage, desperation, and something deeply personal. The manner of death was officially labeled homicide, and every detail investigators uncovered only deepened the mystery and tension. How could this happen? Why would Nick allegedly attack his own parents? And how did such a brutal act occur in one of Los Angeles's most affluent neighborhoods, in a home meant to symbolize security and comfort? As the investigation unfolded, witnesses began to describe the family dynamics that may have contributed to this tragic outcome. The Reiners were a prominent family, known not only for Rob's legendary career in Hollywood, but also for their private family life, which was marked by both love and tension. Jake, the eldest son, had always been close to his parents and protective of his siblings, especially Romy. Nick, the youngest, had a history of personal struggles that reportedly caused concern among family members. But no one imagined these issues could escalate into violence of this magnitude. Imagine the horror Romy must have felt walking into that home, finding your parents dead, knowing your brother is implicated, and having to call the authorities, all while trying to process the shock and grief. Every family has secrets, but in this case, those secrets became deadly. The police quickly began piecing together a timeline, trying to understand not only the cause of death, but also the sequence of events that led to it. Reports suggest that the attack was sudden and unprovoked, leaving questions about motive, planning, and whether there were any warning signs that went unnoticed. As the details emerged, the media exploded with coverage. Every news outlet, every social media account seemed to carry the story. The public was fascinated, horrified, and intrigued all at once. How does a family with wealth, fame, and influence experience such a brutal act from within? And how does the law handle the aftermath, particularly when the accused is a direct heir to the estate? The first hours after the discovery were critical. Police had to secure the scene, interview family members, and begin what would become a complex and high-profile investigation. Romy's statements were pivotal. She reportedly told authorities about Nick's presence and raised alarms about his potential involvement, labeling him as a dangerous individual. This information became the foundation for the arrest that followed, a shocking twist that would reverberate through headlines and social media feeds around the world. Nick Reiner was arrested the very night of the incident and charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. The gravity of the charges cannot be overstated. First-degree murder carries the implication of premeditation, intent, and a level of planning that adds another layer of horror to the narrative. The public reaction was immediate and intense. People questioned how a son could commit such acts against his own parents, while legal analysts began speculating about what this would mean for the Reiner estate and the surviving family members. Jake's position in all this is uniquely agonizing. He not only had to cope with the grief of losing both parents, but also the shock of having his brother accused of this heinous crime. And then, just when the emotional stakes seemed unbearable, he discovered the hidden clause in Rob's will. Nick, despite everything, was still named as a beneficiary, receiving exactly $1. To Jake, it was an outrage, a symbolic insult, and a legal technicality that felt like salt in an open wound. How could the man accused of murdering your parents still be named in their will, even symbolically? And yet, legally, this was deliberate, a strategic move designed to protect the estate from being contested. The tension between law and emotion is palpable here. On one hand, Rob Reiner's decision shows foresight, planning, and a desire to protect the remaining family from prolonged legal battles. On the other, it is almost impossible to accept emotionally, particularly for Jake, who is navigating grief, anger, and disbelief. How do you reconcile the cold logic of the law with the raw, human experience of betrayal and loss? The answer is complex, and it sets the stage for the unfolding drama that will dominate headlines and family conversations for months, if not years. The Reiner estate itself adds another layer of intrigue. The property, valued at $13.5 million, is sprawling and luxurious, complete with goose houses, private gardens, and hidden corners that could hold secrets yet to be discovered. Nick's proximity in the guest house, the timing of the attack, and the discovery by Romy all create a narrative that is part crime thriller, part family saga. Every detail, from the architecture to the placement of rooms, contributes to the tension. Could there be more hidden evidence, undiscovered documents, or clues that have yet to surface? As investigators continue to piece together what happened that day, the narrative takes on multiple dimensions. There's the immediate tragedy, the loss of life. There's the familial betrayal, the alleged involvement of a son. And there's the legal intrigue, the hidden clause in the will, the $1 inheritance, and the strategic foresight of a father who planned for every eventuality. Each layer adds to the suspense, keeping the public, family members, and legal observers on edge. Now consider the emotional toll on the family. Romy, as the first to discover her parents, had to bear the immediate shock, then the weight of responsibility as her statements formed the backbone of the investigation. Jake, grappling with anger and grief, is left to navigate both the personal and legal implications of his brother being implicated and still named in the will. The psychological impact is profound. Families are not just legal entities. They are emotional ecosystems, and this tragedy has disrupted every element of that ecosystem. At the same time, the public watches, rapt. Social media explodes with opinions, theories, and sometimes misinformation. News outlets dissect every aspect of the case, from the forensic details to the implications of the $1 clause in the will. People are fascinated by the contradiction, a son accused of the most heinous crime still receiving a symbolic portion of the estate. How does the law allow it? Why would a father do such a thing? And what does this mean for the surviving family members, emotionally and financially? As day turns to night, and investigators comb the estate for every shred of evidence, the tension only escalates. Each room, each document, each testimony becomes a piece of a larger puzzle. And while the world watches, Jake is left to wrestle with grief, rage, and the complex legal realities that Rob Reiner left behind. The discovery of the $1 clause is just the beginning. There are hints that other secrets might still be hidden, clauses, letters, or even documents that could further illuminate the intentions of a father who thought of everything. So here we are, at the very beginning of an unraveling story that combines tragedy, family betrayal, and legal drama. The Reiner estate is more than just a luxurious home. It's a stage for a complex narrative where every detail matters. And as we move forward, each revelation will challenge what you think you know, each twist will provoke questions, and each discovery will deepen the emotional stakes. The murder, the will, the family dynamics, all of it is interconnected, building to a story that is both shocking and impossible to forget. How does a family survive when the unthinkable happens, and the person suspected of causing the tragedy is one of their own? That was the question everyone was asking after the shocking discovery at the Brentwood estate. By the time law enforcement arrived on that quiet Sunday evening, the Reiner household had transformed from a picture of suburban luxury into a high-stakes crime scene, and the world was about to watch as everything unraveled. Nick Reiner, 32, had been living in the guest house on the property, mere steps from where his parents, Rob and Michelle, were found dead. The proximity alone was enough to make investigators take a hard look at him, but it was Romy's discovery of the bodies and her immediate statements that brought Nick into the spotlight. She described her brother as a dangerous family member and emphasized that he should be considered a suspect. Her account set the stage for what would become a nationally covered arrest and legal storm. Nick's arrest that night was swift, a move that shocked both the public and the family. The police charged him with 2 counts of first-degree murder. First-degree murder is not just about intent. It's about premeditation, planning, and a level of deliberation that turns this case from a crime of passion into a calculated act, or so the charges imply. For the Reiner family, this legal label was almost secondary to the emotional devastation. Losing your parents is unimaginable. Losing them to the person you grew up calling brother or son is something almost no one can process. Jake Reiner, the eldest, was left to grapple with layers of grief, outrage, and disbelief all at once. Imagine receiving a call from the authorities confirming your parents' deaths and that your sibling is the prime suspect. The mental and emotional strain is unimaginable. And then, to make matters even more surreal, Jake discovered the $1 clause in the will, naming Nick as a beneficiary. The mixture of grief, anger, and legal intrigue was almost too much to bear. How do you mourn while simultaneously preparing for a legal battle over your parents' estate? How do you reconcile the law with raw human emotion? The public reaction was instant. News outlets ran with the headline, "Nick Reiner arrested in Brentwood double homicide." Social media exploded as thousands of people weighed in, debated motives, and tried to make sense of what was unfolding. Some offered sympathy to Jake and Romy. Some questioned Nick's mental state, and others speculated about what could have triggered such a violent act. Every minute brought new headlines, new video clips, and new angles. The Reiner family tragedy became a national obsession overnight. The authorities provided limited but impactful details in their initial statements. Rob and Michelle had died from multiple sharp force injuries, and the scene had been secured to preserve evidence. Investigators described the act as violent and personal, hinting at emotional and psychological factors that may have played a role. Forensic experts were called in to reconstruct the sequence of events, trying to piece together how the attack could have occurred without alerting neighbors or security. Every detail mattered. Every room, every footprint, every shred of DNA became part of the story that would dominate news cycles for weeks. Jake's emotional state during this time was a whirlwind. Reports indicate that he struggled to process the dual shock of his parents' deaths and his brother's alleged involvement. His outrage intensified when he reviewed the will and found the $1 clause granting Nick a symbolic presence in the estate. From his perspective, there was no justification for naming the son accused of murder, legally or emotionally. But the law, as Rob's attorney later explained, tells a different story. By including Nick, even with a nominal sum, Rob effectively prevented him from contesting the will, safeguarding the estate from prolonged legal battles. The clash between emotional justice and legal strategy created an impossible tension, one that Jake and Romy would have to navigate for months. As the investigation proceeded, questions about motive began to surface. Nick's past behavior, personal struggles, and relationship with his parents were scrutinized. Sources close to the family described tension, occasional arguments, and what some perceived as underlying resentment. However, no one expected these issues to escalate to the level of violence witnessed that day. The contrast between Nick's history and the severity of the alleged crime only added layers of complexity to the story. How does a family predict such extreme behavior? Can prior warning signs truly indicate danger, or are some tragedies simply impossible to foresee? The arrest also set in motion a wave of legal maneuvering. With first-degree murder charges, Nick faced the potential of life in prison without parole. Lawyers began to strategize on both sides. The prosecution to build a case based on evidence, witness accounts, and forensic analysis. The defense to challenge the narrative, question motives, and examine procedural aspects. Amid this, Jake and Romy found themselves caught between personal grief and the broader implications for the estate and family legacy. How do you pursue justice while protecting your inheritance and the memory of your parents? The $1 clause in Rob Reiner's will became a focal point of media attention. Headlines highlighted the irony. The son accused of murdering his parents would receive a symbolic dollar, not as a reward, but as a legal safeguard. Experts explained that by naming Nick, Rob prevented him from legally challenging the distribution of the estate. It was a masterstroke of foresight and legal strategy, a way to ensure that the surviving children and other beneficiaries would not face protracted litigation. But the symbolic gesture ignited fury in Jake, who saw it as a slight, an unnecessary reminder of Nick's place in the family despite his alleged actions. Social media debates raged. Viewers from around the world weighed in, speculating on motive, questioning the fairness of the will, and offering opinions on how the surviving siblings should proceed. Some praised Rob's strategic thinking, while others criticized the symbolic inclusion of Nick as cruel or insensitive. Every new detail of the investigation added fuel to the fire, from the timing of the murders to the forensic evidence and the legal documents made public. The story became a blend of family tragedy, crime investigation, and legal drama that captivated the public imagination. At the estate itself, investigators continued their work, meticulously documenting evidence, taking photographs, and collecting samples for analysis. Every corner of the Reiner property was examined, from the main house to the guest house where Nick lived. Police were looking not only for physical evidence linking Nick to the crime, but also for any documents or items that could clarify motive, premeditation, or other family dynamics. Each discovery raised new questions. Were there letters, notes, or recordings that hinted at underlying conflict? Were there legal documents beyond the will that revealed more of Rob's intentions? Meanwhile, Jake had to process what these events meant for his role within the family and the estate. Beyond grief and outrage, he faced practical challenges, managing the estate, dealing with lawyers, and making decisions that could affect the family legacy. The duality of his situation, mourning his parents while confronting a brother accused of murder, created tension that was both emotional and logistical. Every choice carried weight, and every action had the potential to inflame or resolve family conflict. The public fascination with this story cannot be overstated. Media outlets, social platforms, and true crime enthusiasts dissected every known fact. From the brutal nature of the murders to the intricacies of the will, audiences were riveted. The combination of family betrayal, legal strategy, and shocking violence created a narrative that felt almost cinematic, a real-life thriller playing out in the homes of a prominent family. For Jake and Romy, however, the media spectacle was a double-edged sword. While coverage brought attention to the case and applied pressure for thorough investigation, it also amplified their grief, exposed private details, and created a constant reminder of the family tragedy. The symbolic $1 for Nick became a lightning rod for both public opinion and personal anguish, highlighting the tension between legal maneuvering and emotional justice. And just when the tension seemed unbearable, new details began to emerge. Forensic reports suggested timing and sequencing that raised further questions. Witness accounts hinted at interactions between Nick and his parents that day that might explain the sudden escalation. And amidst the chaos, Jake continued to scrutinize the will, searching for hidden clauses, overlooked provisions, and any detail that could provide clarity or leverage. Every discovery seemed to open new doors, each more shocking than the last. As the hours and days unfolded, the Reiner family's world had been irrevocably changed. The arrest of Nick Reiner marked only the beginning of a long, complicated legal, emotional, and media journey. First-degree murder charges were filed. The estate became a point of contention. The public became deeply invested in every revelation. And through it all, Jake and Romy had to navigate grief, anger, and the practical realities of a family shattered by violence. But even amidst all this, one question lingered. If Rob Reiner's will was so meticulously planned, could there be other hidden clauses, other surprises, waiting to emerge? What else had the family patriarch accounted for? And how would those discoveries affect the surviving siblings, the estate, and even Nick's legal standing? What if the most shocking part of this story wasn't the tragedy itself, but the secret hidden in plain sight, buried within the pages of a legal document? That's exactly what Jake Reiner discovered when he began scrutinizing the final will of his late father, Rob Reiner. What initially appeared to be routine estate planning quickly revealed a detail that would ignite outrage, fascination, and heated debate. Nick Reiner, the very son accused of murdering his parents, was still named in the will, but only to receive a single, solitary dollar. At first glance, it sounds absurd. $1. Practically symbolic. Yet the implications are staggering. This is not a gesture of generosity. It is a calculated legal move. According to Rob's lawyer, the decision to include Nick, even minimally, was deliberate. By naming him as a beneficiary, even for a token sum, Rob ensured that Nick could not legally contest the will. It's a loophole designed to protect the surviving family and preserve the distribution of his estate. $1, an amount so trivial that it seems almost laughable, becomes a tool of legal precision, a safeguard against the chaos that could arise if Nick attempted to challenge his exclusion entirely. For Jake, however, the discovery was infuriating. He had just lost both parents in a horrifying act, and now he faced the surreal reality that the alleged perpetrator remained legally acknowledged in the will. Jake reportedly exclaimed, "He shouldn't be mentioned, not even symbolically." For him, this was more than legal maneuvering. It felt like an insult, a lingering shadow of betrayal embedded in the very document meant to provide closure and distribute his parents' estate. The emotional weight of this realization cannot be overstated. Imagine grieving the loss of your parents, navigating the shock of your siblings' alleged involvement, and then discovering that the legal protections your father implemented to safeguard the family simultaneously highlight the accused son's inclusion. It's a complex mixture of relief, outrage, and disbelief. Relief because the estate is protected, outrage because it feels morally incongruent, disbelief because the legal technicality seems almost cruel in its symbolism. Legal experts explain the rationale behind such a move in chilling clarity. In high-stakes estates, leaving a symbolic amount, sometimes as small as $1, is a known tactic. By doing so, the testator acknowledges the individual but effectively prevents them from legally disputing the will. In the Reiner case, it served as a final protective measure for Jake, Romy, and any other beneficiaries, ensuring that the estate could be settled without the drawn-out litigation that often accompanies family disputes, especially when emotions are running high. It's cold, calculated, and yet undeniably effective. But the law and human emotion rarely align neatly. While Rob's intentions were pragmatic, the reaction from Jake and the public was visceral. To see Nick's name in the will, regardless of the nominal amount, acted as a constant reminder of the horror, the betrayal, and the unresolved tension that now defined the Reiner family. How could a father be so strategic and yet so seemingly insensitive at the same time? And how would Jake reconcile this legal brilliance with his own pain and fury? The discovery of the hidden clause also raised broader questions about Rob Reiner's foresight and understanding of family dynamics. He had planned meticulously throughout his life, his films, his career, his public persona. But here, in the final act of estate planning, he combined legal precision with an intimate awareness of the family's potential volatility. By including Nick, Rob effectively controlled the narrative even from beyond the grave. He safeguarded the estate, minimized the risk of litigation, and ensured that the surviving children would have legal clarity in an emotionally tumultuous time. Yet the irony is palpable. The very act designed to prevent legal chaos creates emotional turbulence. Jake, Romy, and the rest of the family are left to grapple with the dual realities of grief and legal strategy. The media quickly seized on the $1 clause, spinning headlines about the bizarre and symbolic inheritance. Social media erupted with commentary. Some called it genius, some cruel, some an emotional affront to the surviving children. The public debate only added to the complexity, making a private family tragedy a national spectacle. Jake's personal journey through this discovery was harrowing. Reports suggest that he combed through every page of the will, searching for additional clauses, overlooked provisions, and any indication of his father's intentions. With each revelation, the tension mounted. The $1 clause was not merely a token. It was a statement of control, a legal safeguard, and a symbolic message all in one. And yet, for Jake, It was impossible to detach the legal reasoning from the emotional reality. Every time he saw Nick's name, the rage resurfaced, compounded by grief and disbelief. The symbolism of $1 cannot be understated. It's a number almost universally recognized as trivial, yet in the context of the Reiner estate, it carries immense weight. It's a message that communicates, in legal terms, inclusion and exclusion simultaneously. By acknowledging Nick, Rob prevented him from contesting the will. By limiting him to $1, Rob communicated the absolute minimal level of recognition, enough to satisfy legal requirements, but no more. For the public, it seems like a clever loophole. For the family, it is a reminder of betrayal, a trigger of anger, and a spark for intense emotional conflict. Adding to the intrigue, legal analysts pointed out that this technique has historical precedent. In estates where potential heirs may be problematic or potentially litigious, testators often leave a nominal sum to ensure legal protection. While $1 may seem insignificant, it holds the power to block any attempts to dispute the will. The Reiner case, however, stands apart due to its shocking context. The beneficiary is accused of the very crime that caused the death of the parents. It's a combination of high-stakes estate planning and a real-life crime thriller. The emotional layers are just as compelling as the legal ones. Jake, reeling from grief and shock, had to confront the reality that his father's final act, meant to protect the family, also included the alleged perpetrator in a symbolic gesture. Romy, too, was navigating her own emotions, having discovered the bodies and raised the initial alarm. Their anger, confusion, and sorrow were compounded by the knowledge that, legally, Nick's inclusion could not be easily undone. It was a masterclass in strategy, but one that cut deeply into the heart of those left behind. Media outlets immediately pounced on this discovery. Headlines screamed about the $1 clause and the hidden will loophole, fueling public fascination and outrage. True crime forums, social media groups, and legal analysts dissected the strategy, debating its fairness, morality, and implications. Some argued that Rob Reiner's foresight was brilliant. Others saw it as emotionally insensitive, an unnecessary acknowledgement of a son accused of murder. The public spectacle intensified the emotional strain on Jake and Romy, forcing them to navigate grief under a spotlight that never dimmed. But beyond media frenzy and public speculation, the $1 clause also sparked questions about motive, family dynamics, and the legacy Rob intended to leave. Was the clause solely a legal tactic, or did it also reflect Rob's understanding of his children and their complex relationships? Did he foresee the potential for litigation, or was this clause a preemptive measure in response to ongoing tension between siblings? The answers remained hidden, buried in legal language and intent, waiting for Jake and the world to uncover them. For Jake, the discovery became a pivotal moment. It was no longer just about grieving. It was about understanding the legal and emotional architecture his father had left behind. He began to examine every line of the will, considering its implications not just for the estate, but for the surviving family members, the media narrative, and even public perception. Each revelation carried the potential to shift understanding, to reshape the story, and to redefine what it meant to inherit both wealth and legacy from a parent who had been taken too soon. And just as the significance of the $1 clause began to sink in, Jake started to wonder, what else had Rob Reiner left hidden? Were there additional provisions in the will that had gone unnoticed? Could there be other legal maneuvers, protective clauses, or symbolic gestures buried in the legal language, designed to safeguard the family or to send a message? The discovery of this hidden clause opened a Pandora's box, one that promised to reveal even more secrets, contradictions, and emotional revelations in the chapters ahead. The $1 clause was more than just a legal footnote. It was the opening act of a drama that combined family tragedy, legal strategy, and emotional complexity. It challenged notions of fairness, morality, and justice. It forced Jake to confront both the brilliance and the cruelty of his father's foresight. And it left the public asking the questions that would dominate discussion for months. Why include Nick at all? How much control can a father exert from beyond the grave? And what would happen next in a family already torn apart by violence? What kind of mind plans for every eventuality, even beyond death? That's the question that arises when you examine Rob Reiner's final legal strategy. At first glance, the $1 clause in his will seems almost absurd, a token amount given to the very son accused of murdering him and his wife. But the deeper you look, the more you realize the deliberate calculation behind it. Rob Reiner, a man known for meticulous planning, foresaw the chaos that could erupt after his passing, and he engineered a safeguard that was as brilliant as it was emotionally provocative. The purpose of naming Nick, even for a single dollar, was to block him legally from contesting the will. This is a tactic known to estate lawyers as a method of preemptive control. In high-value estates, especially those involving multiple heirs or potential conflicts, testators often leave nominal sums to individuals who might otherwise challenge the estate's distribution. By acknowledging Nick, Rob created a legal lock, a safeguard that would prevent litigation from spiraling out of control. It's a small sum, but in the world of estate law, it wields enormous influence. Jake Reiner's reaction to this legal maneuver is easy to understand from a human perspective. To him, the gesture was symbolic and infuriating. The son accused of murdering his parents is still named, still legally acknowledged, still part of the framework Rob Reiner left behind. It felt like a betrayal, an unnecessary recognition of someone who should, in Jake's eyes, have been erased from the family's legal and emotional landscape entirely. And yet, the logic behind the clause was undeniable. Rob's foresight extended beyond merely blocking Nick from contesting the will. He understood the potential fallout of a legal challenge. If Nick had been completely excluded, lawyers explain, he could have had grounds to file disputes, tie up assets in court, and create prolonged litigation that would have further traumatized the surviving children. Rob's $1 clause is an elegant solution. It acknowledges Nick, but neutralizes his power to disrupt the estate. In other words, it's a masterstroke of strategy, cold and calculated, yet designed to protect his family from additional suffering. But what makes this legal move particularly fascinating is the interplay between law and family dynamics. The Reiners, like many families, had tension beneath the surface. Nick's behavior had caused concern for years, and yet no one expected it to escalate to murder. Rob, aware of potential disputes, inserted a clause that speaks to both the practical and symbolic. It's almost as if he anticipated that one day, this scenario might occur, and he wanted to control the outcome, even in the worst-case scenario. Imagine the precision required to pull this off. Rob Reiner, a public figure with an enormous estate, had to coordinate with attorneys, account for potential heirs, predict human behavior, and structure a will that would hold up legally while also managing the family's expectations. Every clause, every line, every phrase was deliberate. The $1 clause was not an oversight. It was the culmination of years of careful thought, balancing legal protection with emotional considerations. The public reaction to this revelation has been intense. News outlets, social media, and legal commentators all focused on the juxtaposition of grief and strategy. How could a father, in his final act, exercise such meticulous control over the estate while leaving a token of recognition for the very son accused of a heinous act? The answer lies in the intersection of law and foresight. Rob's goal was not to reward or forgive, it was to protect. And the irony is almost cruel. The more strategic the move, the more emotionally fraught it becomes for the surviving children. Legal experts have weighed in, explaining that such tactics are not uncommon in high-profile estates. But what makes the Reiner case unique is the context. Typically, a $1 clause might involve a distant relative or an estranged child. In this case, the clause directly intersects with a violent tragedy. It is a convergence of legal brilliance and emotional complexity, creating a situation that is both fascinating and harrowing. Jake, meanwhile, is left to navigate the fallout. He understands the legal rationale, yet he cannot ignore the personal implications. Every time he contemplates the clause, he is reminded of the horror of his parents' deaths, the alleged role of his brother, and the symbolic presence of Nick in the estate. It's a psychological and emotional burden that compounds the grief, anger, and disbelief he is already experiencing. Beyond the immediate legal strategy, Rob's foresight likely extended to other contingencies. The wording of the will, the specific amounts allocated, the naming of beneficiaries. All were calculated to prevent challenges, minimize confusion, and ensure that the estate could be executed according to his wishes. Even in death, Rob exerted control, using legal tools to shape outcomes, manage potential disputes, and protect the surviving children from additional trauma. But the complexity doesn't end there. By including Nick, Rob also created a narrative that the public could latch onto. $1. Symbolic acknowledgement, legal safeguard. These elements converge to create a story that is emotionally charged, legally intricate, and publicly captivating. The clause is a pivot point, a focal element that illuminates both the brilliance of Rob's strategy and the intensity of the family's emotional response. The legal nuance is striking. Leaving a nominal sum to a potentially problematic heir ensures they have standing in the eyes of the law, but simultaneously neutralizes their ability to contest broader aspects of the estate. In other words, Nick is acknowledged just enough to prevent litigation, but not enough to gain advantage. It's the kind of precision that demonstrates deep understanding of legal mechanisms, family psychology, and the potential for conflict. Jake's challenge, however, goes beyond understanding the law. He must reconcile the legal strategy with the raw emotional impact. Every time he sees the $1 clause, it is a reminder of both his father's brilliance and the cruelty of circumstance. How can you honor a father's foresight while simultaneously grieving for parents lost to violence and grappling with the symbolic inclusion of the accused in their final wishes? It's an impossible emotional equation. Meanwhile, the public remains captivated. Headlines focus on the hidden clause and the $1 inheritance, driving fascination, debate, and speculation. Social media commentary ranges from admiration for Rob's legal acumen to outrage over the symbolic gesture. True crime enthusiasts dissect the reasoning, offering theories about motive, family dynamics, and the intersection of law and emotion. Every new detail fuels discussion and keeps attention fixed on the Reiner family saga. And yet, despite all the planning, the drama is far from over. The clause, while effective legally, sets the stage for further revelations. Other hidden provisions may exist. Other safeguards, letters, or notes could be waiting to surface. Rob's meticulous strategy ensures that each detail has significance, and Jake is only beginning to uncover the layers of legal and emotional intent embedded in the will. The $1 clause is more than a legal footnote. It is a symbol of control, foresight, and the intersection of strategy with family tragedy. It underscores Rob Reiner's understanding of human behavior, legal mechanics, and the unpredictable nature of grief and conflict. For Jake, it is a source of frustration and outrage, a reminder of betrayal, and a testament to his father's enduring influence, even in death. And just when it seems that the clause represents the final piece of Rob's strategy, questions arise. Could there be more hidden protections? Additional clauses that further anticipate conflict? Letters, conditions, or stipulations that reveal yet another layer of foresight? The discovery of the $1 clause is only the beginning of understanding the scope of Rob Reiner's legal brilliance and the emotional fallout it has left behind. What truly defines a family? Is it blood, loyalty, love, or the quiet bonds we take for granted? For the Reiners, the answer is anything but simple. On one side, you have decades of shared memories, celebrations, and milestones. On the other, tension, resentment, and secrets that no one outside the household could ever understand. The tragedy at the Brentwood estate revealed just how fragile the veneer of a family can be, and how quickly trust can unravel when emotions, wealth, and suspicion collide. Rob and Michelle Reiner were pillars of their family. Rob, 78, a filmmaker of legendary stature, was both admired and demanding, known for his meticulous attention to detail, whether on a film set or in his home. Michelle, 70, balanced the family with her own quiet strength, overseeing household operations and offering emotional support to her children. Together, they created an environment of structure, discipline, and love, yet beneath the surface, like in many families, tension simmered. Jake Reiner, the eldest, was always close to his parents. He was the responsible one, often the mediator when conflicts arose. But even his relationship with Nick had been fraught with complexity. While siblings often quarrel, there had been moments of concern. Nick's behavior, his impulsiveness, and reported clashes with the family's expectations had caused unease. Yet no one could have predicted that these underlying tensions would erupt into the violence witnessed that fateful Sunday. Romy Reiner, the youngest daughter, found herself in an unimaginable position. At 27, she became the witness, the messenger, and the one who had to process both grief and horror simultaneously. Discovering her parents' bodies was traumatic enough. Realizing that her brother was implicated in their deaths added a crushing layer of emotional complexity. Romy's role highlights how family dynamics can shift dramatically in crisis. Suddenly, her position within the household was both protective and revelatory. She was the one who called authorities, flagged the danger, and became a central figure in the investigation. Nick Reiner, the youngest child and the alleged perpetrator, had a complicated history within the family. Sources indicate that he had always been unpredictable, sometimes struggling with personal challenges, other times clashing with parental expectations. While many families have tensions between siblings, the Reiners' wealth, fame, and public visibility magnified every disagreement. And when tragedy struck, those hidden tensions exploded into the spotlight in a way that no family could easily contain or comprehend. The interactions between siblings were a mixture of camaraderie, rivalry, and unspoken conflict. Jake and Nick had a complicated relationship, protective, competitive, and at times strained. Romy's relationships with her brothers were also layered. Loyalty, frustration, and fear intertwined in ways that made navigating family gatherings or decisions fraught with unspoken tension. This context is crucial because the dynamics of the household shaped not only the events leading up to the murders, but also the way the surviving siblings would process grief, responsibility, and legal matters in the aftermath. Family therapists suggest that households with high expectations and underlying rivalries often operate under a delicate balance. One small incident, unresolved resentment, or triggering event can destabilize everything. For the Reiners, the combination of fame, financial assets, and personality clashes created pressure points that were almost inevitable. It's a reminder that family dynamics are never simple, and that even the most seemingly functional households can harbor hidden fractures. Adding to the complexity is the way wealth interacts with family dynamics. The Reiner estate, valued at $13.5 million, was not just a home. It was a symbol of accomplishment, a repository of memories, and a potential source of conflict. In families with substantial assets, emotions often intersect with money, creating situations where legal strategy and personal feelings collide. Jake's outrage at the $1 clause naming Nick is a perfect example. The legal protection designed by Rob collides with the emotional sense of justice for the surviving children. Another layer is the parents' approach to raising their children. Rob and Michelle reportedly instilled values of responsibility, respect, and independence. They encouraged creativity, ambition, and resilience. Yet, like many parents, they could not predict how their children would react under extreme stress, or how hidden resentments could manifest. The tragedy exposes the limitations of parental influence. Even the most structured upbringing cannot control every outcome, especially when human behavior, emotion, and opportunity intersect in unpredictable ways. Communication, or the lack thereof, also played a role in the family dynamic. Sources suggest that tension had been simmering quietly, with unspoken grievances, disagreements, and competing priorities creating a backdrop for conflict. When tragedy struck, these communication gaps became critical. Romy's ability to alert authorities, Jake's interpretation of the will, and Nick's alleged actions all illustrate how unaddressed tensions can escalate into catastrophic outcomes. Moreover, the symbolic presence of Nick in the will complicates the emotional landscape. To Jake and Romy, it is a reminder of their brother's connection to the family, even as he stands accused of unimaginable acts. Psychologists note that such symbolic gestures, while legally practical, can intensify grief and anger, creating internal conflicts between reason and emotion. How do you honor the legal genius of a parent while processing the visceral reality of loss and betrayal? For Jake, this question is a daily struggle. The public's fascination with the Reiner family dynamic stems in part from the intersection of wealth, fame, and tragedy. People are drawn to the tension between image and reality. A family known for success and achievement, now publicly grappling with betrayal and murder. Media coverage often emphasizes the contrasts: idyllic wealth versus domestic horror, public achievement versus private dysfunction, legal precision versus emotional chaos. This magnifies the scrutiny and pressure on the surviving siblings, who must navigate their grief under a lens that rarely allows privacy or nuance. The dynamics between siblings also reveal insights into human behavior under extreme stress. Jake, as the eldest, carries responsibility not only for processing his grief, but also for managing public perception, legal matters, and the practical realities of the estate. Romy must navigate her dual role as witness and survivor, balancing emotional needs with the requirements of the investigation. And Nick, accused and isolated, represents both a legal challenge and an emotional puzzle. A figure whose past actions and alleged crimes shape the narrative in ways that ripple across every interaction. Within this context, the $1 clause in the will functions as both a legal instrument and an emotional trigger. It is a deliberate acknowledgement of the complex family structure, but one that forces the surviving children to confront the presence of the accused in a formalized, unavoidable way. Every reading of the document, every discussion of the estate, becomes a negotiation between logic and emotion, strategy and feeling, protection and outrage. Family dynamics, especially in high-stakes situations like this, are rarely straightforward. They involve layers of history, personality, expectation, and unresolved conflict. The Reiner tragedy demonstrates just how thin the veneer of stability can be when emotions, wealth, and unforeseen events collide. Sibling relationships, parental influence, and family legacy all intersect, creating a situation that is as psychologically complex as it is legally challenging. As investigations and legal proceedings continue, the Reiner family dynamics remain central to understanding the unfolding story. Each revelation about the will, each legal maneuver, and each media headline interacts with the internal struggles of Jake and Romy, shaping their responses and influencing public perception. The family, once a private unit, has become a lens through which the public examines questions of loyalty, morality, and the interplay of law and emotion. And yet, even in the midst of grief and outrage, one question looms larger than any other. Could there be even deeper secrets hidden within the family's history, documents, or the estate itself? If Rob's $1 clause was so calculated, what else might he have prepared? Could there be other protections, provisions, or messages awaiting discovery that could further illuminate the intentions, tensions, and dynamics within the Reiner family? How does the world respond when tragedy, betrayal, and wealth collide in the public eye? For the Reiner family, the answer came swiftly and relentlessly. Within hours of the news breaking about Rob and Michelle Reiner's deaths, the story exploded across every media platform imaginable. From cable news to social media feeds, everyone wanted a piece of the Reiner saga. Every shocking detail, every revelation about the will, every nuance of the family drama became content. The timing was brutal. The tragedy had already left the surviving children reeling, struggling to process grief and shock. And now, the public's gaze was fixed on them. Jake and Romy were not only coping with the trauma of losing their parents, but also with the intense scrutiny that came with being members of a prominent family. Their every move, statement, and reaction was dissected and analyzed by commentators, legal experts, and the voracious audience consuming every update. Social media, in particular, amplified the story beyond what traditional news could achieve. Hashtags, trending topics, and viral discussions kept the Reiners at the center of public attention. True crime enthusiasts debated motives, analyzed timelines, and theorized about the significance of the $1 clause in the will. Some praised Rob's legal foresight, others criticized the symbolic inclusion of Nick, and still others speculated about hidden motives, psychological triggers, and unresolved family tensions. The story quickly became a perfect storm of tragedy, intrigue, and high-profile legal drama. The $1 clause became a lightning rod for discussion. News outlets, legal analysts, and even casual viewers were captivated by the paradox it represented: the son accused of killing his parents was legally acknowledged in the will. Headlines like $1 inheritance sparks outrage, and legal loophole names alleged murderer in family will dominated feeds, reinforcing the story's sensational angle. For the public, the combination of family betrayal, wealth, and legal complexity created a narrative that was impossible to ignore. Jake Reiner, meanwhile, had to contend with a dual challenge, managing his own grief while navigating the swirling media storm. Every comment, every news clip, and every social media post was a reminder of the tragedy and the controversy surrounding the estate. Jake's emotional strain was compounded by the knowledge that Nick, the alleged perpetrator, remained a named beneficiary, a legal presence that could not be ignored. The juxtaposition of law and emotion became a central theme in the coverage and a constant source of tension for the surviving siblings. The media frenzy wasn't just about facts, it was about narrative. Outlets highlighted the most shocking, the most emotional, and the most sensational elements. The brutality of the murders, the alleged involvement of a son, the complexity of the will, and the public outrage over the $1 inheritance. All were crafted into a story designed to captivate, provoke, and sustain attention. Ratings spiked, social media engagement skyrocketed, and the Reiner tragedy became a national conversation almost overnight. Public reaction was polarized. Some viewers empathized with Jake and Romy, understanding the horror of losing parents to violence while grappling with the legal intricacies of the will. Others focused on Nick, questioning his motivations, mental state, and the legal implications of his inclusion. Forums and comment sections were filled with speculation, moral debate, and even personal attacks, reflecting the intense emotional investment the public had in the narrative. The story became